If you ask most Americans what Canada is known for, they'll mention peaceful skies, vast northern wilderness, or a reputation for quiet reliability. But beneath that calm exterior is a story many in the United States don't fully understand, one of ambition, disappointment, and a national dream that was never allowed to reach the sky. In 2025, that story has suddenly returned with surprising force. And the spark that reignited it isn't American at all. It's Swedish, backed by British engineering. And it's reshaping North America's defense conversation in ways few expected. What if the moment Canada waited more than 60 years for is finally here? What if the spirit of the Avro Arrow, the country's boldest technological achievement, has found a modern successor? And what if this time, Canada actually gets to finish what it started? Those questions sit at the center of a rapidly changing defense landscape in North America. In Washington, analysts are watching closely. In Ottawa, debates are heating up. And across Canada, especially among those who remember or grew up hearing about the Arrow, there is a sense of both hope and unfinished business. To understand why 2025 feels so different, Americans need to understand just how deep the Arrow runs in Canadian identity. When the Avro Arrow flew in the late 1950s, it wasn't just another military project. It was one of the fastest, most advanced interceptors ever built, capable of reaching Mach 2, climbing to extraordinary altitudes, and carrying radar and avionics that stunned even U.S. engineers. For a moment, Canada stood shoulder to shoulder with the world's top aerospace powers. Then, almost overnight, the entire project was destroyed. The Arrow's cancellation in 1959 is remembered in Canada not as a technical failure, but as a political one. A decision shaped by pressure, fear, and alignment with larger powers. What was lost wasn't just an aircraft. It was a future. It was the possibility that Canada could shape its own defense destiny. For Canadians, especially those familiar with the North, the Arctic, and the realities of operating in brutal winter conditions, the Arrow became a symbol of what could have been. Fast forward to 2025, and suddenly that old scar matters again. Not because someone is trying to bring the Arrow back, but because the circumstances feel hauntingly familiar. Canada is once again facing a choice between following an American-designed ecosystem or pursuing something that gives it more control, more freedom, and more industrial sovereignty. Only this time, the option for independence isn't coming from a domestic program. It's arriving from Sweden, powered by a Rolls-Royce partnership that Washington did not anticipate. Saab's offer to Canada involving the Gripen E is not a traditional fighter sale. It's something fundamentally different, a chance for Canada to build its own aircraft again. That alone is enough to get the attention of Canadians who remember the Arrow story. But when you add Rolls-Royce into the equation, offering engine collaboration in the EJ200, EJ230 class, the conversation becomes even more dramatic. For the first time since the Arrow's Orenda engine program collapsed in 1959, Canada could step back into the world of high-performance aerospace propulsion. That possibility isn't just technical, it's emotional, economic, and political. It speaks to a national identity that was interrupted. For American viewers, here's the key. Canadians are not anti-American. They're not trying to challenge U.S. leadership. But they also understand something Americans often forget. Canada is huge, remote, Arctic, and unique. What works for the continental U.S. does not always work in the Canadian North. And when you combine that reality with decades of watching their own aerospace capacity shrink, it becomes clear why the Gripen proposal has so much emotional weight. The Gripen E was designed from the ground up for nations that need autonomy. It operates from highway bases, maintains high readiness with small crews, and thrives in freezing climates. Its maintenance system is simple compared to U.S. fifth-generation fighters. And most importantly for Canadians, it offers something no American system will: complete access to mission software. For Canadians who remember how the Arrow fell, this is a powerful message. It means Canada can choose its own weapons, make its own upgrades, and maintain its aircraft without depending on another nation's approval. That idea resonates profoundly in a country that values sovereignty, especially in the Arctic. But the real shock, the part that caught Washington off guard, comes from Saab's industrial offer. Instead of saying, "Buy our jet," Saab essentially told Canada, "Build it yourselves." A full domestic assembly line, technology transfer, Canadian control over software and integration, cold weather optimization tailored to the north, and a long-term role in upgrades shared with Sweden and Brazil. This is the kind of offer the United States has never given to Canada. Not with F-18s, not with F-35s, not with anything. For a U.S. audience, that's the moment the story shifts. Because when a country the size of Canada gains real aerospace independence, the strategic map changes. Washington knows exactly what is at stake. If Canada chooses the Gripen Rolls-Royce partnership, several long-standing advantages weaken at once. U.S. dominance over fighter engines, U.S. influence in NATO interoperability, control over Canadian mission data, F-35 industrial monopoly, leverage over Arctic air operations. For a country as integrated with the U.S. as Canada is, that shift is enormous. It doesn't break the alliance, but it changes the balance inside it. Still, none of this makes sense without understanding the one region that defines Canada more than any other: the Arctic. Unlike the U.S., Canada's northern frontier is not symbolic. It is real, vast, and increasingly contested. Russia continues expanding Arctic bases. New sea routes are emerging as ice melts, and China is entering Arctic diplomacy with growing confidence. Yet Canada has been forced to defend this environment with aging CF-18s, limited infrastructure, and systems optimized for warmer, more populated airspaces. Gripen changes that equation. It can operate from remote, frozen surfaces. It requires minimal ground support. It is built for cold start reliability and dispersed basing. And this matters because Canada does not need a jet designed for global power projection. It needs a jet designed for extreme geography. For American viewers who may assume the F-35 is the obvious choice, this is where the story becomes clearer. The F-35 is a phenomenal aircraft, but it is also part of a closed ecosystem controlled entirely by the United States. It demands complex maintenance hubs, long runways, and dense support systems. Gripen, by contrast, offers a survival-focused philosophy, one that Canada understands instinctively. For Canadians watching this debate, the parallel to 1959 is impossible to ignore. The last time Canada had a chance to build its own fighter, the decision was taken away. Now, in a completely different geopolitical environment, the opportunity is back, but this time it comes from allies who are not trying to control the outcome. And that is why the opening chapter of this 2025 story feels so historic. Not because it promises a return to the past, but because it offers Canada the chance to finally complete something it began generations ago. Fan 2. To understand why the Gripen Rolls-Royce proposal is generating such unprecedented interest in Canada, Americans need to recognize something essential. This isn't an aircraft discussion anymore. It has evolved into a national conversation about identity, independence, and the future of Canadian aerospace. When a country has lived with the unresolved weight of a cancelled dream for more than 6 decades, an opportunity like this carries emotional gravity that can't be measured in simple procurement charts. And in 2025, that gravity is reshaping how Canadians view their position in the global defense ecosystem. While the F-35 represents integration into the dominant American-led model, the Gripen represents a fundamentally different choice, a path where Canada stands not behind the United States, but beside partners who believe in shared decision-making. For Canadians, especially those who remember how the Arrow ended, this difference matters. Saab's offer takes a philosophy Sweden has followed for decades: small nation, maximum sovereignty, and adapts it to Canadian needs. And Canadians across the political spectrum are realizing something Americans often overlook. Canada is not a small nation. It is, geographically, one of the largest countries in the world. Its airspace is vast, remote, and in many places unforgiving. Its northern frontier defines who Canadians are culturally, strategically, and historically. Any aircraft Canada flies must match that reality. This is where Gripen's operational design resonates so deeply. Unlike many American-built aircraft, Gripen is not optimized for massive, well-funded bases spread across friendly territory. It was built from the ground up to operate from small, dispersed locations, including rural roadways, using minimal ground crews. In Sweden, this philosophy emerged from the need to survive against larger powers. In Canada, it aligns perfectly with the realities of the Arctic, where distance, weather, and isolation are constant forces. For Canadian aerospace experts, the appeal is simple but profound. Gripen fits the geography. From a U.S. perspective, some of these concerns might seem distant. America does not have to defend thousands of kilometers of Arctic coastline or maintain constant readiness in temperatures that can plunge below +40 degrees. But for Canadians, this isn't abstract. It's daily reality. And when those Canadians compare the operational demands of their environment with what Gripen offers, rapid turnaround, highway operations, simplified maintenance, they see a fighter that feels built for their world. The industrial side of the proposal adds another layer of significance. Saab's commitment to local assembly is more than just a gesture. It's an invitation for Canada to rebuild something it has not possessed since the late 1950s, a fighter aircraft industry with real autonomy. And Canadians are acutely aware of what that means. For decades, Canadian aerospace talent has excelled in global supply chains, but the country has had limited ability to design, assemble, or control a complete combat aircraft from the ground up. The Gripen proposal, supported by Rolls-Royce, changes that. It offers the chance to build not only the airframe, but to participate in the development, servicing, and potentially even production of a modern fighter engine, something Canada hasn't been able to do since the Orenda engine line that powered the Arrow. Americans may wonder why engine participation matters so much. The answer lies in how power is distributed in the aerospace world. Engine makers hold enormous influence. They control upgrade paths, maintenance cycles, and long-term support. The United States has dominated this field for decades through companies like Pratt & Whitney and GE. Allowing Canada to step back into the arena is not a small shift. It is a structural change in the global defense industrial balance. Washington understands this better than anyone. That is why the Gripen Rolls-Royce discussion has triggered polite but unmistakable concern among U.S. analysts. If Canada becomes a co-producer of fighters and engines outside the American ecosystem, then for the first time since the Second World War, the North American aerospace landscape will not be entirely U.S.-centered. The United States would remain the dominant player, but it would no longer be the sole architect of regional air power. Canadians see this dynamic clearly. While many admire the F-35's capabilities, they also recognize the implications of joining a system where mission data, upgrades, maintenance timelines, and even deployment decisions are deeply tied to U.S. interests. Most Canadians appreciate the alliance with the United States, but they also understand that sovereignty sometimes requires the ability to say, "We choose our own path." Gripen provides that option. The Arctic dimension only sharpens this discussion. As melting ice opens new shipping lanes, global interest in the region is increasing rapidly. Russia continues to expand its military presence in the high north, and China is extending its influence through Arctic diplomacy. These shifts create a strategic environment Canada cannot ignore. But to defend the Arctic effectively, Canada needs an aircraft that can be based in remote northern communities, refuel and turn around quickly, and operate from rough or improvised surfaces. Gripen was designed for exactly that kind of mission profile. Its ability to launch from short, rugged stretches of road, its low maintenance footprint, and its high readiness rate make it ideal for a region where infrastructure is sparse. Canadians know they cannot rely on a handful of massive air bases vulnerable to modern cruise missiles or cyber disruptions. They need a fighter that can scatter, survive, and continue flying even in worst-case scenarios. Gripen's entire operating philosophy, born from Sweden's doctrine of dispersed defense, aligns perfectly with this requirement. In the United States, most people never have to think about how an aircraft survives if major bases are taken offline. But in Canada, such scenarios are taken seriously. It isn't paranoia, it's geography and responsible planning. Another factor resonating strongly in Canada is the possibility of contributing meaningfully to Allied defense while maintaining sovereignty. Sweden has a long track record of supporting partners through realistic training, pilot conversion programs, and cooperative development. For Canada, now navigating a more complex strategic world, joining an aerospace partnership built on collaboration rather than control feels like a natural fit. All of this leads to a broader realization for Canadian viewers. Choosing Gripen isn't about rejecting the United States. It's about embracing a model where Canada can stand taller within the alliance, where it can contribute more, produce more, and shape more of its own future. And for American viewers, there is a lesson in that. Allies who feel empowered are stronger partners. Countries that retain their own capabilities, industries, and expertise bring more to the table, not less. Gripen doesn't weaken the alliance. It strengthens Canada's role within it. This is why debates in Ottawa during 2025 feel different from past procurement cycles. This time the question isn't, which jet has the flashiest specifications? It's, which future do we want to build? And that question echoes through every corner of this conversation, from the Arctic to the assembly line, to the remains of the Arrow's broken wings that still symbolize what Canada once dared to dream. As the debate intensifies in 2025, one truth becomes increasingly difficult to ignore. Canada is standing at a crossroads it hasn't faced since 1959. That year marked the end of the Arrow and the collapse of a dream that could have reshaped North American aerospace forever. Now, more than 6 decades later, the country once again finds itself deciding whether it will follow a path shaped by outside powers or step into a future built with its own hands. For Americans watching this from the outside, it's important to understand that this isn't an anti-American sentiment. Far from it. Canadians have fought beside the United States in every major conflict of the last century. They share the world's longest undefended border and a deep bond of trust. But trust does not mean dependency, and partnership does not require surrendering the tools of national self-determination. This is precisely why the Gripen Rolls-Royce proposal has captivated so many Canadians. It doesn't ask Canada to be a follower. It doesn't require Canada to accept a one-size-fits-all solution designed for someone else's geography or someone else's strategic goals. Instead, it gives Canada something it hasn't held since the Arrow program was shut down: the freedom to build, maintain, adapt, and evolve its own fighter capability. It is difficult to overstate the importance of that distinction. When a nation controls its aircraft, it controls its skies. When it controls its engines, its software, its upgrade cycles, and its industrial base, it controls its future. And when it can train its own engineers, assemble its own airframes, and design its own tactical doctrine without waiting for approval from elsewhere, it becomes a stronger and more resilient partner for every ally it stands with, including the United States. The Gripen model, refined through decades of Swedish defense policy, offers exactly that. It is built on dispersed operations, rapid maintenance, highway-based flexibility, and sovereign software rights. In Sweden, this philosophy keeps the nation operational even under the most extreme scenarios. In Canada, the same philosophy would transform the country's ability to defend vast northern territories that the F-35, despite all its advanced features, cannot support with the same logistical ease. The Arctic is where this debate becomes truly existential. Americans rarely have to think about defending a frozen frontier stretching thousands of kilometers, where bases are few and supply lines are thin. But Canada lives that reality every day. The Arctic is not just geography, it is identity. It is where the nation tests its capabilities, protects its sovereignty, and demonstrates its commitment to stewardship of a region the world is watching more closely each year. Gripen's ability to operate in that environment is not a theoretical advantage. It is a practical one. The aircraft can fly from rugged stretches of road, sustain high readiness with small teams, and launch quickly in extreme cold. These traits are not luxuries for Canada. They are necessities. When Canadians see those capabilities side by side with the high infrastructure requirements of the F-35, the difference becomes clear. One jet fits the textbook definition of a modern airpower projection system. The other fits the day-to-day reality of defending the North. Yet the decision before Canada is not just about mission capability. It is also about whether Canada wants to rebuild an aerospace industry worthy of its history. Saab's offer to build assembly lines in Canada, to train Canadian engineers, to provide access to source code, and to share responsibilities for upgrades and integration is something unprecedented in Canadian defense procurement. No allied country, including the United States, has ever offered Canada that level of industrial autonomy. When Canadians discuss this proposal, they aren't simply comparing technical specs. They're asking deeper questions. What kind of country do we want to be? Do we want to rely on foreign ecosystems, or do we want to build our own capacity? Do we want our next generation of engineers to assemble wings and engines in Canada, or to watch as those jobs migrate to distant factories we don't control? For many Canadians, especially those who remember the painful end of Avro Arrow, the answers feel obvious. They see in the Gripen Rolls-Royce partnership an opportunity to correct a historical wrong, an opportunity to rebuild something meaningful, not just materially, but symbolically. Americans may be surprised by how much the arrow still resonates. But for Canadians, it's not nostalgia. It is a national reminder of what happens when ambition collides with geopolitics. They know what they lost. And in 2025, they can see what might be regained. Aerospace independence, a revived manufacturing ecosystem, and a renewed sense of national pride. The geopolitical implications of such a decision are significant, but not destabilizing. A Canada that is stronger, more independent, and more capable is good for the United States. A Canada that can defend its Arctic territories with confidence reduces the burden on NORAD. A Canada that can produce and maintain modern aircraft locally adds resilience to North America's defense posture. And a Canada that participates actively in Allied modernization through engines, sensors, or airframes becomes a more agile and proactive partner. Washington may be cautious about losing influence, but wise strategists understand that empowered allies are force multipliers. Sweden knows this. The United Kingdom knows this. And increasingly, Canadians know this too, which brings us to the central truth of this moment. 2025 is not simply another procurement cycle. It is a turning point. The choice Canada makes will echo across decades, shaping its role in NATO, determining its Arctic strategy, and deciding whether its children grow up in a country that builds world-class aerospace systems, or merely buys them. The echoes of 1959 still linger. The arrow's wings never flew again, but its spirit, its audacity, its innovation, its refusal to accept limitations imposed from the outside, is alive and undeniable. And that spirit is rising in this debate. For the first time in generations, Canada has a chance to choose a path that aligns with its geography, its values, its engineering heritage, and its strategic future. A Swedish jet and a British engine might seem like unexpected catalysts for a Canadian renaissance, but history often turns on surprises. The only question now is whether Canada will seize the opportunity or let it pass as it did once before. The world is watching. Washington is watching. But most importantly, Canada is watching itself. And this time, the decision belongs entirely to them. Thank you so much for watching and for staying with us all the way through this deep dive. If you enjoyed the analysis, the storytelling, or simply gained a new perspective on Canada's future in the skies, please take a moment to hit the like button, subscribe to the channel, and turn on the notification bell. Your support truly helps us keep producing high-quality, independent defense content for viewers who want more than headlines. Viewers like you. I'd love to hear your thoughts as well. What part of Canada's strategic crossroads stood out to you the most? Do you think the Gripen Rolls-Royce partnership represents a turning point for North American air power? And if you were advising Canada today, which path would you recommend for the next generation? Share your insights in the comments. Every viewpoint adds something valuable to the conversation, and this community is strongest when we learn from each other. Thank you again, Matt, for being here. Wishing you a great day wherever you are in the world, and I look forward to seeing you in the next episode. Stay safe, stay curious, and take care.